We're live.
Is it live or is it Memorex? Good evening, Erica.
Hello, Robert. How are
N-
you?
Nice to be back. I take a couple weeks off. Got a few bionic parts put in me.
Nice.
All I want for Christmas is a new left knee. So we're sort of working that
Okay.
through.
Okay.
We're all going to be. We're going to. We'll be
Hopefully,
just
no
fine.
Neuralink, so that you turn into one of these robots. An Elon Musk robot. It's not like a Tesla knee, is it?
No. But speaking of robots, it's a great segue into the fact that once again, we're asked to trust the federal government, this time on the drones, right? Nice segue, don't you think?
Oh, I love it. Perfect.
So it makes me feel a lot better that my government basically is saying that, well, we've investigated it and just trust us. All these car-sized drones that you see flying over New Jersey, and I'm from New Jersey, of course, originally, there's nothing to worry about. I believe, what did they say? There's no evidence that the drones are anomalous or a threat to national security or public safety. Well, that makes me feel better.
Right.
What about you?
I all I know is that when the federal government tells me that I'm safe and secure, I just always feel so warm and cozy inside. I'm like, everything will be just fine. Oh my God, who believes that crap? Oh, then if you know that they're not nefarious, bro, then tell us what they are there for.
Well, the interesting thing is the Biden administration initially came out with a statement that said, they're safe. Don't worry, that when they're not flying over any military establishments, only to have to walk that back because apparently in both New Jersey and Ohio, they have been. Now, I don't know who's behind the drones, but isn't this regulated by the FAA?
Yes.
Aren't all drones supposed to be registered? So
yes.
Why can't they find out? I mean, I'm all for shooting them down, and I understand that you're legally not allowed to do that. So I'm not advocating for someone to do that. But if it were me, but if it's regulated by the FAA, I don't understand why we don't know more about it unless, of course, hi, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Just trust us and don't worry about it. It's not a threat. So in any event,
and that's Robert, we do video production. We have drone operators. You have to have licenses. You have to get permission to have them up in the air. We're told that if you have drones illegally in the air, you can get them shot down. You can go to jail, all kinds of crazy crap. So if you want me to believe these are just some jokers having fun, I've got a bridge to sell you.
Well, all I can tell you, because obviously from New Jersey, live in New Hampshire. If this were over in New Hampshire, there'd be a few down already. I can just tell you, live free or die is a real thing. But in any event, we have a very special guest, Dr. James Carafano from Heritage Foundation, coming up. Let's roll the monologue, and really looking forward to speaking to him a few minutes right into the show. Let's roll him. Hello, and welcome to Of the People. I am back. And the war on religion continues. America today is painfully aware of the shooting at the Abundant Life Christian School in Madison, Wisconsin yesterday. And our hearts go out to the families of the deceased and those that were injured, and just the senseless loss of life up there. True to form, the Democrats and the media have instantly rolled out their talking points. Get your gun. It's about gun control and gun violence. And the truth of the matter is, gun violence isn't really what they want you to believe it is. Gun violence usually breaks down into two areas. The first one is ideology or war on religion. And the second is usually mental health. And there's no question that there is a continued war on religion in this country, affecting both Christians and Jews. The shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, the First Baptist Church in Sutherland, Texas, the Burnett Chapel in Nashville, the mass shooting at the kosher grocery store in Jersey City, the Passover shooting at the Chabad in Poway, right? And let's not forget the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina at that church over the years. And that's just to name a few. There's an incredible rise of anti-Semitism and anti-Christian bigotry in this country. But it's also about mental health. Which is for some reason seems even harder for people to acknowledge as a driving issue, as a root cause for the shootings that we are seeing. Whether it's the breakup of the family, whether it's the isolationism, whether it's the loss of faith, whether it's the loss of belongingness, drug abuse, other factors we could talk about. Mental health is another driving force in all of this. The shooting at Appalachian High School outside of Atlanta, the Old National Bank in Louisville, where the shooter actually streamed live the shooting in Florence, Kentucky a couple of years ago. Let's not forget Austin, Texas as well. We have created a culture, ladies and gentlemen, where violence in the name of politics, or more accurately, ideology, is permissible. And let's not forget recently, not one, but 2 assassination attempts on President Trump during the election cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, a gun is not good or bad. A gun is an inanimate object. What you do with it makes it good or bad. And it's just that simple. It is beyond naive and dangerous to think that if you take away everyone's guns, that you would solve the problem and take away the problem. Bad people will get guns. Those are the facts. And if by some fantasy or fairy tale, the government was able to get all your guns or our guns and firearms, they would find other weapons or toxins or poison which inflict harm or cause fatality, because it's not about the tool. It is about the person. And let's not forget that the right to bear arms in this country is sacrosanct. There's a reason it is the Second Amendment to the Bill of Rights, buttressed up against the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the essential freedoms of democracy. The Second Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, is there to protect our rights on the First Amendment. As for yesterday's shooting and tragic shooting in Madison, I don't know the real motive behind it. And hopefully through the investigation, we will all find out the real motives. And hopefully that the police investigation is transparent, because too often we don't get the answers and the information is withheld. And that hopefully that the families of those that were killed and injured find some solace in that information when it's out there. But we also hope and pray that in this country, we start to have an honest conversation about the root cause of these kinds of shootings and the anti-religious bigotry and hatred, unfortunately, by part of this country against a large part, if not majority of this country, those of us who, quote unquote, cling to our guns and religion, as well as the factors that contribute to the mental health crisis that clearly exist in this country that nobody wants to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not about the guns. As Shakespeare said, look not to the stars, but rather to ourselves, both as part of the problem and hopefully as part of the solution. And that's the monologue. Erica, come on back in.
Hello.
Hello. I am honestly thrilled to have with us our guest tonight.
Yes.
Right? Dr. James Carafano, author, historian, national security, foreign policy expert, cybersecurity, Army veteran. I could go on. The list is long. Dr. Carafano, thank you so much for making the time and joining us on Of the People. Welcome.
It's great to be with you. Look, just listening to the monologue and seeing the montage there, I mean, you had me at the nuclear explosion. So I am all in for this.
Fantastic.
The question is, do you know where we poached the nuclear explosion from?
No, but there's not that many, so it's not.
It was the Barry Goldwater ad, the daisy chain Barry Goldwater ad in 1964.
In your heart, you know he's right.
How am I doing?
Good. So far.
Welcome to the show. And before we get started, both Eric and I wanted to extend a personal thanks to you and to Heritage for being such an early sponsor and large part of our Israel Appreciation Day event that we had a couple months ago in Las Vegas. It was part of it was Heritage's early support that made everything else roll from there. So we did want to say thank you, because as goes Israel, so goes the rest of the Western world.
So I gotta tell you, so my colleague, Victoria Coates, who just came out with this fantastic book about Israel policy, and they just had a book book event for her at Heritage with our president, Kevin Roberts, and Senator Ted Cruz. They wanted to borrow the U.S.-Israel thing for the book event, and so it's prominently displayed there.
Oh, cool!
So you guys are getting some love tonight.
Fantastic.
I have one behind me.
I know, and so it made me think of that. So it's prominently, so they got all their books out there, and it's prominently featured there, and everything is there you go.
That's fantastic.
I love to hear that. Thank you so much. You know, just to jump, because I know your time is short with us. You know, the whole situation with the drones and the cyber warfare. I know. What are the questions we should be asking? I mean, we're getting obviously not a lot of information from the federal government. And I guess the question really is, because as I said in the opening, or the kibitzing as we call it, I thought drones were regulated by the FAA, and I'm not even sure we understand the right questions to ask. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. Look, so I get asked a lot about the drones, right? And one of the things that I've been in the national security business for a really long time. I've been at Heritage for 22 years. And one of my rules is I don't ever guess. And if I don't know, I say, I don't know. And look, I'm not in the intelligence community. And so I basically have the same information as every other American. So when I get asked this question, what are these things? My answer is, I do not know. But here's what I do know. If you want to go back and Google, I wrote papers on this, 10, 12 years ago, and talked about the future of drones in the United States. And I covered both sides. On the one side, I said, people don't understand the incredible potential that using drones has for the economy, for innovation, for all. It's infinite. And we should be doing everything we can to make America a leader in this space. On the other side, I said, look, you can also use these things for adversarial purposes, and we should get ahead of the power curve and figure out how we're going to address that as well. So I don't know what this is, but here's what I can tell you with a lot of authority, as somebody who has, worked with and followed the Department of Homeland Security and everything else for a long time. We have spent the last 4 years, surveying school board meetings, providing concierge service to illegal aliens, persecuting Christians who are thinking the wrong thoughts in public. We have done everything with the systems that we built post 9/11 to protect the American people, except use them for the purpose of protecting the American people.
Wow.
So here we have a case of an emerging threat where the need was obvious. Okay, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you wouldn't see that, but certainly in the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, with the swarming drones and all that.
Absolutely, totally obvious, right?
Yeah.
And what's more, the technology, the capability to address this and ensure the sovereignty of our airspace, whether it's a bomber flying over from Russia or a Chinese surveillance balloon or a drone, is available. And what have we done the last 4 years? We've used the system that was designed to protect us for everything else
against ourselves.
But that.
Yeah.
That I know for a fact.
And I just so everybody knows, I went over to the Heritage Foundation, and sure enough, look at 2013, like you were talking about this. You literally were talking about this 10 years ago.
We've literally been advocates, for example, for, most of the drones used in U.S. airspace are built in China. We know for an absolute fact that all of those drones are subject to being exploited by the Chinese. We've done nothing about that. And we called for banning the use of Chinese drones in the United States. People ignored it. Here's what I'll tell you. I don't know what this is, but I'll tell you what it really is.
Yeah.
It's a blessing from God. This is
okay. You need to explain. You need to explain this to me.
Say more,
this
doctor.
This is a warning to the American people. It is going to happen. If we just sit back and do what we're doing now, someday Americans are going to die adversarial use of drones in the United States.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
People don't know about the swarming drones. Like, they don't know that that's a thing. And I'm like, it is not science fiction, y'all. This is not movies. This is real life. We've
actually had in the United States somebody prosecuted for planning to fly a drone into a electrical power station to do a blackout. That's already happened in the United States. That was thwarted. But, you know, it's like, you remember the bombing of the World Trade Center?
Yeah,
of
course.
Van in the basement. Everybody said, well, look at those yahoos, right?
Yeah.
That was God telling us, get serious about these people.
It's coming.
Nothing, and we got 9/11.
Wow.
You know, it's interesting though about the drones. Okay. It reminds me that back in 2019, the Inspector General put out a report about COTS, right? Commercially off the shelf software,
right,
from China that was whether it was Lenovo, whether it was GoPro, whatever it was that was vulnerable for whether it was spying or stealing data or those kinds of things. I mean, which of course some of the states acted on, mostly the Republican states, to be candid. Governor Abbott in Texas acted on it. Governor DeSantis in Florida acted on it. I don't remember if Kentucky did, but there were some that did. But the federal government, you know, did not really do anything about it. And now you have these drones, and you know, I'm sorry, the whole made in China thing should be a red flag to begin with. And then I look at what Israel has been able to do using drones in military capacity to defend itself. And when it doesn't take a rocket scientist, Dr. Carafano, to figure out that if we don't have control of our airspace.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched The Lioness, which is actually a pretty good TV
show.
But,
it's so
good.
But
you see, I mean, in the last season, the cartels were dive bombing the border patrol with weaponized drones, and we know the cartels have already used drones for surveillance. We know they have the capacity to weaponize these things. It's like giving the kids matches and telling them to go play in the garage, and then be in shock when the garage burns down.
Okay, so this has been one of my theories, is that they're being used for drug trafficking. That there's some kind of trafficking, they're being used for something. Because if the government is, this is my where's my tinfoil hat? This is my theory.
Get your tinfoil hat on.
So if the government is allowing this to continue to happen, and they're not shooting them down, and they're not a real threat to society or whatever, then that makes sense that it would be trafficking or something like that.
So here's what we know. We know that the cartels have already used drones and ultralights. You know those little airplanes that basically
the gliders. The gliders.
Yeah. It's basically a glider with a lawnmower, propeller on it, right?
With a propeller that you wind the propeller to get the rubber band tight, and then you glide it in.
So we already know that the cartels have, because they try everything, right? To see how they can move stuff around.
Yeah.
It's not impossible that that's true. So the problem is we can all have theories, but the point is if we can have theories, bad people can have theories, and they're not stupid. They're thinking of the same things we are, and it's just someday somebody's going to do this stuff, unless you give them a good reason not to. So I really worry about this. It is just too obvious an avenue to do all kinds of exploitative things inside the United States.
Well, and we've got millions of illegal immigrants, many of which we know are criminal aliens. We've got known, Chinese freaking police stations that have been busted. We have no idea who is in this country, and they could do all kinds of nonsense.
Well, thank you for bringing that. That's a really important point. We kind of, it's like bell bottoms, right? We go through fads here. So, counterterrorism was this big thing and then, Obama came in and told us that was all done with, right? And so in the last couple of years, it's been all Iran, all China, all Russia. But the reality is I think terrorism is coming back on the agenda for a couple of reasons. One is we have this global intifada, which is like a poison. And so inspiring, I mean, it is yahoos all over the world to do something, encouraging Islamist guys to take another whack at coming at the United States.
Yeah.
We have a wide open border. We have adversarial powers who have lots of influence in Latin America. Lots of people have lots of opportunity to say bad things here. We have new places popping up with bad people. One of the things that Trump did is he named Sebastian Gorka, who's an old friend of mine, as the head of counterterrorism at the National Security Council, the administration. I take that as a positive sign. Seb is a real CT expert, takes it really seriously. And the fact that he was an early name by the president, and that's a prominent position in the NSC, leads me to believe that the incoming administration gets this. But I tell people this after 4 years of Biden and decades of investment post 9/11 in Homeland Security and countering terrorism and everything else. After 4 years of Joe Biden, you are less safe today than you were on September 10th, 2001.
Can I? Okay, sorry, Robert. One quick question,
okay.
And I don't know if this is a silly question, so forgive me if this is a silly question. But I'm just thinking about when we hear that the drones are primarily made in China and they're susceptible to being hacked or whatever, spied on. We've got Lenovo. You've got all of these products that we know are being shipped in. Isn't this an appropriate use of the tariff to really deter Americans from going toward the cheaper alternatives?
Yeah, that's not what tariffs are for.
Okay.
This is a national security matter. If there's if there's a legitimate national security concern, just be banned outright.
Just ban it all the way around.
Like TikTok.
Okay.
And honestly, unless President Trump actively does something to prevent this, by the time he comes into office, the TikTok app will be gone, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And not only should he let that ban stand, we should start going after. I'll give you another example, which is pretty egregious. All these big cranes that move cargo on the U.S. piers, pick up these shipping containers, built in China. All of them can be used for surveillance by the Chinese. Wow. And if the Chinese just want to shut them off, they can figure out how to do that. So the vulnerabilities that we have created are just massive. We should start with the stuff that we know. Okay, known threats and the things that we know that are strategically important. But the reality is there is almost nothing that the Chinese provide which has a connection to the internet and is electronic, which isn't potentially used as a spy vehicle. A lot of people have these little picture frames, and you upload your family photos. Yeah. Right. All made in China. All can be hacked by the Chinese.
Oh my God. I had a whole argument with a friend of mine the other day who's like borderline anarcho-capitalist. And he's like, oh, the tariffs and and this and the cheap goods and poor people and blah, 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 all the things you hear. And I was like, bro, are you legitimately trying to say we're better off with all of the cheap crap that's spying on us, is toxic and whatever, while we allow them to freaking have a hot war, cold war, poisoning American citizens with fentanyl? Like, we're not better for this relationship.
Well, on top of which, obviously, we are dependent on China for so many fundamental things, whether it's medicine. We've outsourced so much that we are vulnerable to China cutting off the minerals we need or the medicine we need. I mean, China has also bought up land in this country. China is also, I think they bought Smithfield Foods, which is the largest pork producer in the country. So, I was going to Dr. Carafano. I was actually going to jump to Israel and Iran, but China was also on my list. So let's stay with China for a second, because this is, to me, China is the man behind the curtain, right? To use a Wizard of Oz analogy or reference, right? The man behind the curtain, because we've argued on this show for a long time that part of the problem is certainly within the Biden administration's 4 years, which we've argued here is really just nothing more than a third term of Obama anyway, so to speak. That's the conspiracy theorist in us. But that China has been at war with us, and part of the problem is we have not acknowledged that. It's a Cold War, whether it's the Belt and Road initiatives in the Southern Hemisphere or the things that, the things that they've done to encircle us economically or militarily. So my question to you in all of this is, with the incoming Trump administration, and I'm not asking you to speak for Heritage, I'm asking you to speak as Dr. Carafano, which is what would your 2 or 3 policy recommendations be to try to check or neutralize China in the first 100 days?
Ban everything. No.
Well, let me just talk generally, because I spend a lot of time in Europe and Latin America and other places, and we all talk about China, and we've all kind of got to get on the same sheet of music. And so what I tell everybody is we all ought to at least adhere to the basics. And so the basics are the 4 no's. One is no strategic dependencies on China. I mean, actually, our friends, the Israelis, are a good example. The Israelis went all in for China. Like a lot of people, they say, oh, it's just a checkbook. And now they've seen literally being stabbed in the back by the Chinese, that the Chinese are not a benevolent and they're not a manageable relationship. They're out for China, and they will stab you in the back if they can. So nobody should have a strategic dependency on China. If you would all value your sovereignty, your independence, your prosperity, and your freedom. Obviously, no military cooperation with China. We're not going to have treaties that they honor. We're not going to have non-proliferation agreements. We can't trust them at all. You have to treat them as a military adversary and not as somebody that you could ameliorate with just by engaging.
Yep.
No ignoring China's human rights record. And I mean, this is ridiculous that the Chinese get a pass. The Chinese have committed a genocide. So people are happy to go out and demonize. I was actually just talking to a Uyghur who got his grandmother out of China, who was held captive there for decades. People are willing to give China a pass on an actually verified genocide while they attack and demonize Israel. It makes no sense. And then no ignoring all the Chinese, whether it's malicious activity, whether it's corruption, bribery, intellectual property theft, fentanyl trafficking. You cannot ignore these things. And if we just all agreed to the 4 no's, we'd be in a big stop. The other thing I'll say is, if China's going to be stopped as a military power, only going to be done by the United States. And we have to start in the Indo-Pacific. We have to be able to have a strong conventional deterrent to the Chinese in the Indo-Pacific. And a lot of people talk about a pivot to Asia. You cannot pivot to Asia and abandon the other critical theaters of the United States. Like we can abandon Europe or abandon the Middle East and just, first of all, we don't have anything to pivot with. 70% of the U.S. Navy is already in Asia. If we took the other 30%, we'd do nothing. So we can't pivot the Navy because the Navy's already there. 90% of the U.S. Army is permanently stationed in the United States. We don't have a big enough army to pre-position major forces anyway. We don't really have large forces in South Korea anymore. We don't really have large forces in Europe. So we have most of the U.S. Army in the United States so we can flex in any direction. You don't pivot the Air Force because we're the only country in the world that has an Air Force that deploys globally. So it doesn't matter where our Air Force is positioned. It goes anywhere. It's actually good to have it dispersed. And you really can't pivot the Space Force because they're in space. So there is no real military pivot to be had, as much as people that wave their arms and talk about that. The only way we're going to be able to build up more capacity and capability in the Pacific theater to ensure conventional deterrence and really put the Chinese back in their place is if the European front and the Middle East front are stable. The European front is largely the Europeans,
which frees up resources.
But the Middle East, that's back on the U.S. We have to put Iran back in the box with Israel, and those are the things that literally have to be done in the next 5 years.
So let me ask you a question though, because obviously it's been reported that the Chinese now have a larger naval fleet than we do. How much of a concern should that be for in real terms?
Well, you know, quantity has a quality all its own. It's great to have the best. I mean, their aircraft carrier cannot match our aircraft carrier, but you know, we only have 10 of them or whatever, and you sink one, it doesn't get replaced.
Yeah.
And the world's best ship or plane can only be in one place at a time. So the fact that they have large numbers, even though operationally they probably aren't a match for the United States, it's pretty significant. So we need a much bigger maritime presence in the Pacific. And we're only going to do that by stabilizing other theaters so the needs aren't as great, and also increasing our military capability, which is, I'm a big fan of this. I'm a big fan of this DOGE idea and everything else, because every military buildup that we've ever done in the U.S. was done with deficit spending. The one thing the United States cannot afford to do now, more deficit spending. So if we're going to build up anything in the U.S., and our military ought to be one of them, we're only going to do that by, one, be more efficient with our military spending, but two, stop spending on stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully the pressure and the strategy of the Musk and Vivek will bring some of that reality to the country. I'm an optimist, one, because we can't really defend the country without doing it without a sound fiscal policy.
Right.
Two is because I think they're so prominent a voice. Three, because the president is behind this. But four, and then I think this is really important, I think we're going to have some pretty good discipline among Republicans in the House and the Senate to really drive.
I hope so.
I hope so. I feel good about that.
Look. The first thing I'll tell you, and we've both been around long enough. I probably don't go back as far as you, but pretty close. Is that personnel is policy?
22 years old.
No. From your mouth to God, God's ears. Me too. I'm getting my parts replaced bionically, so I feel.
I have shirts older than 22.
Exactly.
Same.
You know, the personnel is policy. We all know that. And when you looked at the Biden administration and you saw the personnel, it sort of explains the policy. And when I look at the incoming Trump administration, I am heartened, you know, by that. So with your military background, with your national security background, is there a concern for you with the DEI or wokeness of our military, which I think over time has sort of hurt our battle readiness? Because look, I didn't like when they, I'm a student of history, perhaps not a historian as you are, but it used to be the War Department. Then we went to the Defense Department, right? I mean, and defense is different than waging wars to win. And now we have this whole wokeness in the Army. I'm concerned has hurt our ability to be ready for battle.
I think it's a true statement. I think it has. I think it's had a serious corrosive effect on our armed forces the last couple of years. I think that this is a curable disease. I think when this administration jumps in there and puts an end to this stuff, it'll be gone. It'll die very quickly. And I think the men and women in uniform absolutely want to get back to. I'll give you an example. Remember a couple of years ago how every NFL team had to bend the knee, right? Right. And that's
when I stopped watching.
Right. Well, if you were watching football today, nobody does that anymore. It's like, okay, we're not doing that anymore. Everybody's okay, fine. Oh, you mean we can just play football? Awesome. Right.
Yeah. And now they're doing the Trump dance in the end zone.
That's right. They'll all be doing the Trump dance in the military. Hopefully not in combat, because that would not be healthy. But. Actually, I know a lot of guys in the military, and girls, and most of these people you do not want to see dance.
That's not what I'm looking for them to do. I can tell you.
I want them to probably a good punch people. Yep.
Absolutely. So because I know that I'm getting a cue for station break from our producer, but I also know that you have a little more time. I desperately want to talk to you a little bit about Iran and Israel. Can you stay with us on the other side of the break for a couple of minutes?
You bet. It's
right.
either that or wash the dishes. So yeah.
Yes.
Let's go with
out
that.
washing the dishes. I
yeah, no,
love it.
we'll take first over washing the dishes. So
Yeah.
I got it. Erica, let's roll a quick break. I want to come back to Dr. Carafano.
All right.
America came into being based on a shared belief and a common set of values. Unlike other nations that were bound together based on common ancestry, race, or caste, we came into being based on a simple and shared set of ideals. That the power of government is based on the consent of the governed. That life, the freedom to live life on our own terms in our own way, free from government interference, and liberty, our most precious value, and the pursuit of happiness, which means we are free to pursue that which we choose with the knowledge and courage to know that nothing is guaranteed to us in this life. Those values, America was founded on these basic inalienable rights. Freedom to pray to God in our own way. Freedom to think and speak freely without fear of punishment or harm. And freedom to gather in our places of worship and in our local taverns. And freedom to defend ourselves, our families, our homes, and our neighbors as we see fit. The American Center for Education and Knowledge is dedicated to protecting American exceptionalism anywhere and everywhere it is threatened. ASIC is a 501c3 and depends on your tax-deductible donations. Please help us continue our fight.
And you can help us continue our fight by making sure you like this video, comment on this video, subscribe to the channel that you're watching. And if you guys have a question for Dr. Carafano, throw it in the chat, y'all. We'll ask it. All right.
And welcome back. Dr. Carafano, let's pivot to Iran and Israel. Obviously, post-October 7th, Israel's response in defending itself has basically taken out Hamas, basically defeated Hezbollah with the fall of the Assad regime and clearing up that airspace, and the response, the earlier response when Israel retaliated against Iran, softening up, I would say, some of their nuclear sites. Should Israel, at this moment in time, and this is opinion only, is now the time to go after their nuclear facilities once and for all? Because the concern I'm hearing, not will they, I'm not asking whether they will or not, right? But from an analytical standpoint, right? This is a chat, I'm a political thinker and real politic, right? Capital R, small k, in the old sense of things. Should they, is my question. Is now the time?
Well, I think Israel has always been in a strategically precarious point in that they've always had to play defense. And I think that honestly remains true here. I mean, there was a point that Israel could have gone after some stuff as a retaliation for Iranian attacks. I think that window's kind of passed. I don't think they have to. First of all, the Iranian decision to go nuclear is not an infrastructure decision. It's a political decision.
What does that mean? It's not an infrastructure decision. What does that mean?
In other words, they have the capability to turn a key and say, we're a nuclear power. Boom. Right? Nobody can stop that. And even if Israel destroys part of its infrastructure, I think they still have that capability. So what's keeping Iran from going nuclear is a political decision, that they don't think it's in their interest at this point to declare nuclear capability. We want to keep it that way. Now, look, they may make a decision between now and January 20th, but that's
right
to do this. That window is shrinking pretty quickly. But once Trump in his office, I think what you want to do is convince them that politically they don't want to make that decision. And this regime is very risk averse. So the more they feel threatened and under pressure, the more likely they are to pull in their claws. And so putting Iran in a very, very small box where this regime worries about its own survival is the best way to contain the nuclear threat and also the larger threat. Yeah, actually, this is a point I think I disagree with a lot of people on, that the problem is Iran is a nuclear power. You know what? If they have nuclear weapons, what are they going to do with them? And my answer is I don't think you're going to do anything with them. They're a threat to the region across the board. And you have to deal with the regime. It's like when you have a criminal, it's like, do they have a gun? Your point in your monologue, do they have a gun? Do they have a knife? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The problem is not the weapon. The problem is the person. The problem is not a nuclear arm per se. The problem is the regime. And what you want is this regime to be as afraid of Israel and Donald Trump as possible.
Yeah.
And they're in a very weakened position here. They know that. I think they already see that coming. Donald Trump's going to come into office. He's going to beat them like a rug. And I think that's what's going to keep Iran in the end from going nuclear. And then we can have a longer term strategy about how we make sure they're denuclearized. But the goal is more important. I mean, just as important, maybe even more important, is nobody ever thinks that on October 7th is ever again a good idea. And the way you do that is to make sure they don't have the capacity and the capability to do that. That's my opinion.
So I want to float a theory I have. It's been my opinion for quite some time that this, going back to 2016, the Russia hoax essentially drove Russia in one form or another into China's camp, right? I mean, I think
totally disagree.
Disagree.
They were married already. This notion
were they?
Somehow they were, they had to do this. They love doing stuff with China. They love doing stuff with Iran, because these three countries have one thing in common: they all hate America. And they will cooperate as much as they can get away with it. They can hurt America. So this is not our fault. Nobody drove the Russians anywhere.
Yeah.
These are like mafia families that, they may shoot.
Interesting.
They may, fight for some turf, but at the end of the day, they all hate the FBI.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Just like as conservatives, a lot of times we talk about the parallel economy. I want to give my money to other conservatives. I want to give my money to Christians. I want to spend my money with businesses that are aligned with my values. And so it makes perfectly good sense that a country would do the same thing.
If you want to strain the relationship between Iran, China, and Russia, the way you do that,
right? That's my question.
Is you make them less valuable allies for each other. The more they can deliver to each other. So if you want Russia to not do business with China, then you make Russia so poor and so weakened that the Chinese could care less about the Russians.
Interesting. So in your opinion, it's got to be a stick rather than a carrot, right? So all along, America's been like, oh, if we just open up trade with China, then they'll be cool, and if we just open up trade with whoever,
no, that's not true. I mean, you can have carrots and sticks as long as you use the carrots like a stick to beat them with.
Interesting, because to me the question is how to break the axis, and to me I see Iran is in terms of international terrorism the head of the snake, and I think you can neutralize them. And I was particularly taken by Prime Minister Netanyahu's public statement for the people of Iran recently. I think that was a couple of days ago, right? Which I thought was an incredibly powerful statement. But to me, if you can separate Russia from China's orbit in some capacity, it creates opportunities to box in China. No, you disagree.
Yeah. You box in China by making Russia weak and vulnerable, and making they don't have many friends and allies. You want to make their allies weak and vulnerable. You cannot. The problem with seducing these guys is if you want to seduce them, you have to offer them something more than the Chinese or the Iranians are going to give them. And one, you can never do that. I mean, you'll never do that. And the other is when you ask, what do you guys want? And they're going to say, well, we want you to be weaker.
Yeah.
And let us do what we want. So I know it sounds like, geostrategic chess and all that, but it ain't going to work. Every single American president since Bill Clinton has tried to play nice with the Russians, including Donald Trump. Every single one of them has wound up at the end of their presidency saying, what am I going to do with these guys? And that ain't never going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
we get a very different Russia. And it might be this tiny little enclave like around Moscow.
Do you think
like 14 people?
Is this a justification for the Ukraine war then? I mean, is that what people are like, oh, well, we're weakening Russia, ergo, therefore, henceforth?
Look, Russia weakened Russia. Right? They
Mm,
ran this country so badly that
yeah.
they were losing on every periphery. The Belarus, the government almost was overthrown.
Right.
Moldova, the Georgians, everybody was leaving them.
Mm,
And Trump's and Putin's response to, and the worst was the Ukrainians were turning their back on Russia. And so Putin's response was, I will invade Ukraine. That will be successful. Not only will I punish them, but everybody else will be scared out of their gourd and they'll do what I want. So this is not about us weakening Russia. Russia weakened Russia.
wow.
Russia invaded Ukraine because it weakened itself and it was losing stuff. And now the thing is where are the Russians? They're fighting back in Moldova. The people are in the streets in Georgia. The Belarusians are saying, we don't want to be part of this. And the stands are saying, we don't want to be in the Russian orbit.
Yeah.
This is not the time to be nice to Russia.
Good.
This is a time to give the Russians what they deserve, which is you made your bed, you go lie in it and figure it out. We're not going to throw you. I mean, if you throw the Russians a life raft, whatever those things called, those little donut things, all they're going to use that is to pull the ship under. That's it.
I love it. I love it.
So keep supporting you. So keep supporting the Ukraine in the war.
Look, I think. First of all, I think Ukraine's already lost to the Russians. I don't think the Russians are ever going to. Both these countries are really under a lot of. Both these countries are strategically exhausted. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians. Now, if I were a callous, hateful person, I would say let the war continue forever, because the longer the war continues, the worse the Russians are going to be. Now, that will also decimate the hell out of Ukraine. I, like President Trump, want a ceasefire, not because we need a ceasefire to, deal with Russia. It's who wants to see every Ukrainian die? I mean, actually, it would be better for us to bleed the Russians to death, but that's not very Christian. And we don't need to do that. So we need a ceasefire to save Ukraine, and then we'll deal with the Russian problem. But people keep thinking it's like the super bad child that is like, what can I do to make this kid behave, right? And the answer is, other than disown them and put them in jail, nothing.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep, they're naughty. We need to spank them. That's what I just heard.
And look, I mean, Trump comes in a very, very, first of all, we've already seen the world essentially respond to Donald Trump and acknowledging
the Trump effect.
He is not just the leader of the free world. He's the leader of the world, and everybody's going to be playing Trump's game. We've already seen that. Iran has incredibly strategically overreached. Hamas has been smashed. Hezbollah has been hurt. Syria has been lost. The Iranian economy is in shambles, and this is even despite the fact that Biden gave tens of billions of dollars. Iran is in a very precarious position. The Russians are not in a good position. The Chinese are scared out of their wits by Trump, and their economy is not in great shape either.
Yeah,
this is not the time to. I'm not saying start World War III, because we're not going to do that. I mean, I'm not saying do regime change. I'm not saying bomb people. I'm just saying, when you're winning, you don't take the. It's like there was coaches once saying the one game he always regretted is it was the New York Giants, and they were up, and they had this ground game, and they were just pounding and pounding and pounding and pounding, and then they decided to switch to throwing the ball, and they lost the game. And the guy says, "What was I thinking? I was winning. I had the enemy on the ropes, and I changed my mind, and decided to do something different." We have the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians more on the ropes than people realize. Now is not the time, and this is why Trump now is exactly the right kind of president we need.
Okay.
All right. That's
all right,
pretty
guys,
decisive. That's pretty decisive. The missus is home from Pilates. Yes.
What?
Tell Mrs. we said hello and thank you.
The missus is home from Pilates. It means we have to let you go.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Dr. James Carafano of Heritage Foundation. You know, it's a good show when by the time you're done, my head hurts because I can't take in everything that you just put out there. But
Yes.
we so appreciate your time of coming on the show, and hopefully you'll come back again next time your wife goes to Pilates.
No, hey, I would love to come back. Let's do it again.
Excellent.
And seriously, in all seriousness, thanks for what you guys do. I love the organization. I love what you're doing. I love the podcast. Everyone should listen to you. And you guys should just keep doing what you're doing. If there's anything we can do at Heritage to help support you guys, please just let us know. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
God bless you as well.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Carafano.
Dang.
I'm telling you, my head hurts. There was so much information and knowledge, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's,
right?
you know, it's
and we are right.
Yeah.
American Center for Education and Knowledge.
Oh,
well,
look at
I just got more than I can handle.
Hey, call back. I like it. You know what I really love, Robert, is, you know, you've got these really great connections, these really great friends, people who, like, I haven't heard a lot of those viewpoints. I have not heard a lot of those things being said in the news, in the media. And, you know, you can't get that from CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. You get it from independent media. You get it from the Heritage Foundation. You get it from these think tanks of people who are looking at the world and at history and going, okay, what is reasonable? Now, I'm not saying they're all correct all of the time, but, you know, I'm going to trust Dr. James Carafano before I'm going to trust, you know, you know, some of these CNN anchors.
Look, but you touched on it, right?
Mm.
The fourth estate in the media has long since stopped doing their job. If Donald Trump's election has shown us anything, much like Ronald Reagan in 1980, he was able to go around sort of the establishment and talk directly to the American people.
Yeah.
I think Trump's strategy of using podcasts and using social media allowed his message to go around sort of that cacophony of noise, or this echo chamber, if you will, in the media. So it's by talking to people like Dr. Carafano, it's talking to, you know, some of the other guests that we've had on, that I think it helps. It's so hard now, right, with the cacophony of noise and 24/7 news. And look, when everything is news, nothing is news, right? I mean, how do you filter it, right?
Correct.
And how do you know? I mean, again, you have our government is telling us, which, by the way, I do want to get back to the drones thing, right? The government said, by the way, the government says, and I'm going to get back to our interview with Dr. Carafano, but it says, having closely examined the technical data and tips from the concerned citizens, we assess that the sightings to date include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, and a manner of fixed-wing aircraft helicopters and stars mistakenly reported as drones. Here's my point in all of this, right? They just, so A, if they did the investigation, why didn't they give us more information? And B, they just gave us a lot of information that is frankly useless, because it doesn't answer the question that everyone is asking, is what are they and where are they from and am I safe? Much like being able to go to a Dr. Carafano or go to some of our other guests over time and go around, you know, the CNNs of the world.
Yeah.
Because you have to do, growing up, we had CBS, ABC, NBC, and everybody watched the news at 6, and that was it. But one of the marks of journalism back then is you based on their content, you could not tell what their politics were. That's the way it was supposed to be, right? It goes back to Edward R. Murrow and the Murrow boys and those things as well. But you were passive. You passively got your news. Yeah. And whether the paper was delivered or you watched TV, you know, after dinner or whatever, and you got the news. Now you cannot be passive to get your information, because if you just imbibe what they're feeding you or giving you to drink, doesn't work. So in any event, I thought you were great. Yeah. Great guest, great interview. Yeah. And I'm honest, my head hurts. My head doesn't usually hurt.
That was good. It was really good.
So I want to segue in the few minutes we have left.
Talk to me, Goose.
Because talk to me, Goose.
Talk to me, Goose.
That would make you Maverick. Are you Maverick? Talk to me, Goose.
Well, yeah, in this scenario.
So you're a maverick. Well, you're a maverick. It's okay.
Hey,
I do love that
I'm
about
a
you. You are a maverick.
like
But
John McCain.
our good friend John Andrasik, who's 5 for fighting, who has been one of the staunchest defenders of Israel.
Oh, yes.
And its right to
Ladies and
defend
gentlemen.
itself was part of, obviously, Israel Appreciation Day. Again, we're so thankful. But he's now turned his focus to Justin Trudeau in Canada, because there's a likelihood in the next 24 or 48 hours, Justin Trudeau steps down. Now, I am not prognosticating or saying he will or won't, but certainly the pressure's on. And you know how a picture's worth 1,000 words?
Yeah.
Well, music moves people in ways and gets the message out there that others don't. New song by John Andrasik, 5 for Fighting, about Justin Trudeau. Let's roll that one.
Justin Trudeau wants you to know that he never played hockey. Justin Trudeau has got to go. Stand clear, he never played hockey. Totalitarian parliamentarians, they have no mind to skate. They're only love their hate. They'll freeze your bank account. The Mounties they will mount to trample on your rights like Fidel. Justin Trudeau is rather slow. It's too bad he never played hockey like the great one. This potato has got to go. Get someone who played hockey. He likes to arrest Jews while wearing tailor shoes. The black-faced Bolshevik would never last one shift. He wouldn't shake your hand after a 7th game. He has no honor code like Ty Domi and Bob Probert. Oh, Canada, he's not part of a team. He's wimpy and he's mean. He's the emergency, the true north, strong and free. He never ate a puck. He doesn't give a truck. A Gordie Howe hat trick, the thought wouldn't make him sick. If he just scored one goal, his heart would have a soul. And understand assists are more than shots that miss. And no humility, freedom, liberty, it's more than just a game. God save us. Justin Trudeau wants you to know he never played hockey like the great one. Justin Trudeau has got to go. Get someone who played hockey.
So if Justin Trudeau resigns, John Andrasik at 5 for Fighting deserves all the credit.
All the credit. All the credit.
I mean.
Oh my God. If it's protocol.
Okay, don't sing. Don't. Okay, don't sing. Whatever you do. No, not that song. Don't sing. Yeah. Oh, please.
Oh, dear. I can't.
There's so much more we didn't cover, but I mean, I think that is the priceless right way to end. Again, our thanks to Dr. James Carafano for being our guest from Heritage Foundation.
Yes.
And where can they find us, Erica? And let's roll out of here.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you can find us anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. We are on Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, Facebook. And if you ever can't find us on YouTube, because I have gotten us a couple of community guidelines strike, you can always find us on the free speech platforms of Rumble and Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, go find us. Watch all of the things, all of the amazing other guests like Dr. James Carafano. And next week is Christmas Eve, y'all. And we're not going to be here. Ben and I are going to be celebrating the birth of baby Jesus. And Robert,
but we will have a show. We will have a show
next week for Christmas Eve.
We are.
We are.
It's a special. You have to tune in.
Oh, I remember now.
You're having a brain lapse. Sorry, so
I
ladies and gentlemen,
I thought we were having a week off.
No, there is a show next week.
Oh yes,
you don't want to miss it, and you'll see.
And then definitely tune in on New Year's Eve for our best of episode.
It's live.